थोड़ा डरा दूं क्या आपको? संडे है आज. Okay. Picture this. Tomorrow morning, the Prime Minister calls a press conference. And instead of talking about temple inaugurations or Ambani's latest wedding or how great the economy looks on paper, he starts talking about corruption. He starts talking about inflation, unemployment, farmers' distress, and maybe even our foreign policy on Palestine. We'll be shocked, right? We'd fall off our chairs. I definitely will, because no one expects our leaders to talk about what actually matters to the common man. Now, let's rewind to the 18th century. Poetry back then was pretty much as aristocratic as the politics in our country today. It was full of pomp, performance, distractions. It was about Greek gods. I'll not use the parallel here in India, but we know who the god is. It was about Greek gods. It was about aristocrats, Adani Ambani. It was about lofty ideals. The everyday struggles of ordinary people, issues that really mattered to ordinary people, they were not worth a line of poetry or a line of verse. Nobody wrote about it. And this happened for thousands and thousands of years. So remember Shakespeare, even when he was writing about, look at his central characters. Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. Macbeth, who was a general. King Henry, and so on and so forth. So the idea was that these magnanimous, aristocratic, lofty figures always remained at the center of art. While this continued till around 1750, 1760, and again, I'm looking at a timeline of 2000, 3000 years here, going back to the Greek writers, Aristotle, Plato. And then at the beginning of the 19th century came William Wordsworth. And thank God. So he shocked the system, the entirety of English literature. How did he shock it was, he democratized art, poetry, literature per se. He did to poetry what our political leaders will never do to politics. He put the focus back on the real lives of real people. The year is 1798. Wordsworth and his friend S.T. Coleridge, they've published a work called Lyrical Ballads, Preface to Lyrical Ballads. So Lyrical Ballads is a collection of poems that at first glance, it seemed harmless enough, but in truth, it was a manifesto. It was a revolution in disguise. Why? Because Wordsworth's preface to the second edition, which was published in 1802, which is 4 years later, it laid out a philosophy that challenged everything the literary establishment believed. It was a declaration that poetry belongs not just to elites, but to everyone. In an age which was obsessed with refinement, and August in the neoclassical age has just gone by, and we were still looking at works like The Rape of the Lock by Alexander Pope, suddenly Wordsworth is celebrating simplicity. वो बोल रहा है मैं फूल के बारे में लिखेगा, मैं एक फार्मर के बारे में लिखूंगा, मैं एक बच्चे के बारे में लिखूंगा. In an age of aristocratic heroes, he celebrated these people, farmers, shepherds, washerwomen. Wordsworth did not just change poetry, like I said, he democratized it. So how did he do it? What did Wordsworth argue in this preface to Lyrical Ballads? Let's break it down. Number one, he said, now we'll use the language of the common man. बहुत हो गया ये बड़े बड़े शब्द जो एक आम आदमी को समझ में भी नहीं आते. He argued that poetry should be written in the real language of real people. Not an artificial, ornamented diction that no one actually spoke. Poetry, he said, should sound like life itself. Number two, ordinary life would become the subject matter. He insisted that the lives of common people, farmers, workers, villagers, were just as worthy of poetry as kings and generals. The human heart, he believed, beats with universal emotions, no matter your class. Number three, emotions recollected in tranquility. That was Wordsworth's conception of poetry. For everyone who has studied William Wordsworth or literature at some point in their life, I'm sure they remember this phrase, emotions recollected in tranquility. So the full definition was, Wordsworth always believed poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful emotions recollected in tranquility. So, what it means is, for Wordsworth, poetry begins with powerful feelings. You feel something really strongly. And then it's not just about raw outpouring of emotion on a piece of paper. No. It's those emotions when they are processed and processed for a while, and then they are reflected upon calmly later in a state of tranquility. That was his conception of poetry. That is how he used to write. So poetry becomes both spontaneous and deliberate. It becomes a passion which is then balanced with reflection. So taken together, these three ideas were radical and they made poetry human again. Think of it this way. Before Wordsworth, poetry was like Sham ke Samachar. It kept you distracted, it kept you entertained, it kept you dazzled. After Wordsworth, poetry became like that one brutally honest friend who tells you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it. And that's exactly why the critics of his day, were horrified of him. To them, Wordsworth's subjects were low. His language was too plain. They thought he was degrading poetry, but in reality, he was saving it. So why does Wordsworth matter today? Well, I think my prologue says everything about it. But his philosophy reminds us that art, whether poetry, film, or even memes today, it is powerful when it speaks to ordinary experience. Wordsworth gave legitimacy to voices and lives that had been ignored for such a long time. Every modern novelist who writes about working class struggles, imagine Dostoevsky, imagine Arundhati Roy, there's so many other examples. Every songwriter who captures heartbreak in simple lyrics. Every filmmaker who focuses on everyday life. They're all walking the path Wordsworth created. And just like today's politics could use less distraction and more reality, today's art needs Wordsworth's reminder. Speak to the people. Speak to the people in the language of the people and talk about the lives of these people. So the next time you read a poem about a daffodil or you hear a song that captures your everyday feelings, you can thank Wordsworth. He started all of this. He was the one who believed that poetry isn't a luxury for the few, it's a necessity for all. And who knows, maybe if our leaders borrowed a little from Wordsworth, they'd finally start addressing the truths that we live every day. Stay tuned for the next episode of Literary Lenses. This time we'll look at S.T. Coleridge and how he took Wordsworth's revolution into the realm of imagination itself. For now, do like, share and subscribe. See you.